Hi everyone. In this lecture, I will implement API versioning. But before that, let's check if we have committed everything to local Git repository. I will use git status command to see if everything is committed. And then I will create a new branch using git checkout -b option and with the name version by URI. With versioning by URI, I will add the version in the URL itself. If we add this version on the class level to version a part of the API, we need to create a new controller and version the all API. So for simplicity, here I will create versions on the method level. Let's set all methods as v1 by changing the path. Now first make a single breaking change on the response model and set the string field ID to long. This will most probably break the client code. So I will create a new response model v2 with the long ID. So I will simply copy and paste Elastic Query Service response model class and create a v2 class with a long ID field. Now let's create a v2 version of getDocumentById methods. And just map the response model to the v2 version. I'm keeping the changes only in controller for simplicity here. But even with this, you can see that we are creating a new level of complexity where we need to take care of both versions. Let's create a mapper method to convert v1 version to v2 for the Elastic Query Service response model. And here I parse the string ID to long. And also I add the hey to us links before returning from this getV2 model methods. Then let's call the getV2 model method from getDocumentById v2 method and convert and return the v2 model. Now in the client code, I need to change the URL to include version v2 and also need to parse ID field to long instead of string. Let's now run the Elastic cluster and then the config server. Then I can run Elastic Query Service to call the versions API on Postman. Here I will first call the v1 API and then call the v2 API. As you see, when I call v1 version, we have a string ID, and when I call the v2 version, I have a long ID in the response. Now let's commit the changes and return to master branch. And create media type versioning. Let's also stop the query service at this point. Now I will add media type on the class level because it can be easily overwritten in the methods. I will use custom vendor media type here and use producer's property of request mapping annotation to set the media type by using VND API v1 plus JSON. Here I'm using JSON API with a custom vendor media type. Alright, I will then add a new string text v2 to the original response model. Then I will think if this is a breaking change. Actually no, this is not a breaking change because of the nature of JSON, which is quite extensible. So by just adding a new field, I will probably be OK on the client side, and the deserialization will be done correctly. Only it will not include the new field text v2. And any client that wants this change can actually change the client side to include the new fields during deserialization. So in this case, I will not create a new version. I will only deploy my application with the changes and can mention the changes in the documentation. This is enough, safe, and easier for both server and client. Now let's say I want to change the ID field to long, and then also remove the created at field. In that case, this will no longer be that much safe in terms of client. So considering it is a breaking change, now I should create a new version. So let's create a new v2 model class with the changes, with long ID and with the created at removed. I will also add text v2 string field. Now I will create a new method for getDocumentById with an updated media type on new method. I will only change getDocumentById for simplicity here. Note that this method still has the same URI. Other methods still serving the default v1 version. So here I partially upgraded a single method to a new version. I will change the response type to v2 and create a private method to convert response module into v2 version. And here I will parse the ID to long from string and also set text2 fields, say with the text version 2 text, and then add hey to us links before returning from this method. Then I can call getV2Model method from the getDocumentById v2 method to get a v2 model object. Finally, let's run the query service. Now in the Postman, I will try to call both versions. Client will use the same URL and just change the accept header for switching from v1 to v2. As you can see, without touching to the URL, we can switch to v2 version by changing the accept header and using application VND API v2 plus JSON value. Here I created a new version because I could not be forward compatible here. And now this change will be included both in the documentation and also on the API definition. Great, in the next lecture, we will see that how these two methods with the same URL and different media type can be included in the API documentation by using the Swagger tree, namely OpenAPI tree specification. So I will see you in the next lecture.